The group stage is over. Ecuador shocked Germany. The football world finally started believing. But in knockout football, yesterday means absolutely nothing. Because now, standing between Ecuador and history is one of the most dangerous World Cup nations outside football's traditional giants. Mexico. A team that has lived under impossible expectations for decades. A team that knows exactly how to survive nights like this. One mistake, one transition, one moment of panic, that is often all Mexico need. For Ecuador, this is no longer about proving they belong. They already did that against Germany. This is about proving that one historic night wasn't a miracle. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Because the World Cup has now entered its most brutal stage. Every match is a final. Every mistake is permanent. Every dream survives for only 90 minutes. A nation that understands knockout football better than almost anyone outside the traditional world powers. A team that never waits for opportunities. They create them. They force mistakes. They speed up matches until opponents lose control. And that is exactly why this matchup feels so dangerous. This isn't simply Ecuador's defense against Mexico's attack. It is discipline against intensity. Patience against pressure. Control against chaos. And in knockout football, chaos often wins. But Ecuador have changed. Not because they suddenly became more talented. Not because one victory transformed everything. They changed because they discovered something far more valuable than confidence. They discovered belief. There is a difference. Confidence disappears after one bad result. Belief survives even when everything goes wrong. That belief was tested from the opening match of this tournament. Defeat brought criticism. A frustrating draw brought even more questions. People wondered whether this talented generation had already reached its limit. Then came Germany. 90 minutes that changed the emotional direction of Ecuador's entire campaign. They didn't just defeat one of football's greatest nations. They defeated fear. They proved to themselves that they could survive under the brightest lights. That experience matters. Because knockout football is rarely decided by tactics alone. It is decided by who remains calm when pressure reaches its highest point. Mexico understand pressure better than most teams. For decades they have carried enormous expectations into every World Cup. Millions expect them to advance. Millions expect them to dominate. That expectation creates pressure long before kickoff. Ecuador carries something different. Freedom. No one expects them to control this match. No one expects them to dictate the rhythm. And sometimes that becomes the greatest advantage of all. Still, emotion alone will never defeat Mexico. The tactical battle could decide everything. At the center of Ecuador's system stands Moisés Caicedo. Not simply as their best midfielder, but as the heartbeat of everything they do. Every successful defensive sequence begins with his positioning. Every dangerous transition begins with his awareness. He rarely makes spectacular plays for highlight videos. Instead, he quietly controls moments before they become dangerous. Against Mexico, that responsibility becomes even greater. Because Mexico's greatest weapon is not individual brilliance. It is collective pressure. When they lose possession, they attack immediately. Not toward goal. Toward the ball. They hunt in numbers. They force rush decisions. They create panic. Many teams lose against Mexico before the final pass is even played. They lose because they stop thinking clearly. That is exactly where Ecuador must remain different. They cannot allow the match to become emotional too early. Every unnecessary foul, every careless pass, every rushed clearance, only feeds Mexico's rhythm. Instead, Ecuador must slow the game whenever possible. Frustrate. Delay. Absorb pressure. And then strike with speed. That is where players like Pedro Vite become essential. He is not the loudest player on the field. He doesn't always produce spectacular statistics. But he connects every phase of Ecuador's attack. When Ecuador recover possession, Vite immediately searches forward. Not sideways. Not backwards. Forward. One intelligent pass can completely eliminate Mexico's first defensive line. That single moment could change the entire match. Then comes Ecuador's greatest strength: their defensive partnership. William Pacho and Joel Ordonez have become more than reliable defenders. Together they give Ecuador something every tournament contender needs: stability. One attacks aggressively. The other protects space. One steps forward. The other reads danger before it develops. Against Germany, their understanding looked almost effortless. Against Mexico, it will be tested in completely different ways. Because Mexico don't always attack with patience. Sometimes they attack with pure speed. Quick combinations. Fast overlaps. Constant movement. The defenders won't simply need strength. They'll need perfect communication. And perhaps the biggest challenge won't arrive inside Ecuador's penalty area at all. It may arrive 30 or 40 meters higher. Because if Mexico begin winning second balls in midfield, if they start recovering possession immediately after losing it, if they force Ecuador deeper and deeper, the pressure will slowly become unbearable. That is why the opening 20 minutes could shape everything that follows. Not because they will decide the score, but because they will decide the rhythm. And in knockout football, rhythm often decides history. But rhythm is a fragile thing. One interception, one misplaced pass, one moment of hesitation. That's all it takes for an entire match to change direction. And both teams know it. This is why knockout football feels so different from the group stage. There are no second chances, no opportunity to recover 3 days later. Every decision becomes permanent. Every mistake echoes far beyond 90 minutes. For Ecuador, patience may be their greatest weapon. Mexico will likely demand the ball, increase the tempo, and try to stretch the pitch from side to side. That movement is designed to pull defenders out of shape, creating the tiny spaces where dangerous attacks begin. Ecuador cannot afford to chase every movement. They must trust their structure. Trust the positioning that carried them through one of the toughest qualifying campaigns in international football. Because when their defensive shape stays compact, opponents rarely find clear opportunities. But football is never only about defending. Eventually, Ecuador will have their moments. The question is whether they can be ruthless enough to take them. That has been the challenge throughout this generation. Creating chances has rarely been the problem. Finishing them has. Against the world's best teams, opportunities don't come 5 or 6 times. Sometimes they come only once. Sometimes the difference between history and heartbreak lasts less than 3 seconds. That is where Gonzalo Plata and Inter Valencia become so important. Experience cannot guarantee goals, but it can bring composure when younger players feel the pressure. One intelligent run. One perfectly timed finish. One calm touch instead of panic. Those tiny details often separate survivors from those who go home. Then there is another factor that rarely receives enough attention. Set pieces. In knockout tournaments, corners and free kicks are no longer secondary moments. They become opportunities that can define an entire campaign. Ecuador have already shown that they can punish opponents through dead ball situations. Mexico know that. Every corner they concede will feel dangerous. Every free kick around the penalty area will raise the tension inside the stadium. And that pressure works both ways. Because the longer the match remains level, the heavier every situation becomes. 1 hour. 70 minutes. 80 minutes. Suddenly every clearance is celebrated. Every save feels enormous. Every missed chance becomes impossible to forget. That is when mentality becomes more important than tactics. Championship teams don't always play better. Sometimes they simply stay calmer. Ecuador have learned difficult lessons over the years. Painful eliminations. Missed opportunities. Moments that stayed with an entire generation of supporters. Those experiences can become emotional baggage. Or they can become preparation. This tournament suggests they have chosen the second path. There is a quiet confidence about this squad now. Not the confidence of a favorite. The confidence of a team that understands exactly who it is. They don't need 70% possession. They don't need constant applause. They don't need spectacular football every minute. They need discipline, commitment, and the courage to remain faithful to their identity even when the match becomes uncomfortable. Mexico will test every one of those qualities. They will increase the pressure after every turnover. They will force physical duels across the pitch. They will try to turn the match into something emotional. Because emotional football often creates mistakes. Ecuador's challenge is to refuse that invitation. Play with intensity, not with panic. If they succeed, frustration could slowly shift toward Mexico. And frustration is dangerous. It leads to rushed decisions, forced passes, poor positioning. Exactly the moments Ecuador are built to exploit. This is where Moisés Caicedo's leadership becomes priceless. Not because he will score the winning goal, but because he gives everyone around him confidence. He organizes. He communicates. He closes passing lanes before they become threats. The best midfielders don't always control the ball. Sometimes they control the emotions of an entire match. If Ecuador reach the final 15 minutes still level or even ahead, the psychological pressure changes completely. Every minute suddenly feels twice as long. Mexico know the clock is becoming their opponent. Ecuador know history is getting closer. That emotional contrast creates opportunities that tactics alone cannot explain. Perhaps this match won't be decided by a brilliant solo goal. Perhaps it won't be remembered for beautiful football. Knockout matches rarely are. More often, they are remembered for resilience, for sacrifice, for the team that refused to break when everything around them became uncertain. And maybe that is the true story of Ecuador. Not that they defeated Germany. Not that they reached another knockout round. But that they finally became a team capable of carrying pressure instead of running from it. If they can do that once more against Mexico, the conversation around this tournament changes completely. They will no longer be viewed as a dangerous outsider. They will become a genuine contender capable of troubling anyone left in the competition. Because teams that defend together, suffer together, and believe together are the teams nobody wants to face when the stakes keep rising. Soon, the referee's whistle will bring every prediction to an end. Analysis will disappear. Statistics will lose their meaning. Only decisions made under pressure will remain. 90 minutes. One opportunity. One team moves forward. One team watches the World Cup continue without them. And when the final whistle arrives, the result won't simply reveal who played better. It will reveal which team stayed true to its identity when everything was on the line. Because in the knockout stage, talent opens the door. But character decides who walks through it.